Hello, in this lecture we'll take a look at a problem that will be similar to a homework problem. The numbers will change, the format will remain much the same. The two things that we want to get from these, one will be the accounting concepts, and two, we want to learn how to format the Excel sheets. So we want to learn the basic formatting and maneuvering around the Excel sheets, being basic formulas, basic addition and subtraction within it, use of the cell references within Excel. This is really where you pick up those concepts that you'll be using 90% of the time when working in Excel. So keeping that in mind, let's take a look at what we have here. We've got the accounting equation up top, assets equal liabilities plus owner's equity. We've got the trial balance down below. We're going to have our adjusted trial balance. The closing entries are post-closing trial balance. The trial balance consists of assets on top, represented in green up here, then the liabilities in orange, then the equity accounts being capital and draws, then revenue and expenses below that. We know that the assets are generally debit balance accounts minus the credit balance accounts, and then we'll add up to 0. So if we take the debits minus the credits, they will add up to 0. These green zeros are indicating that we are currently in balance. Net income is the credit of revenue minus the expenses being debits of 88,980. This is revenue at this point. We are now going to do the closing process here. So if we take a look at our directions, we're going to use the two-step method to close out the income statement and draws to the capital account. First journal entry should close all income statement accounts to capital. Second journal entry should close the draws to capital. After this has been done, we should have zeros in all income accounts as well as the draws account. So let's recap where we're at right now. We're at the closing process. That means that the bookkeeping department, the accounting department, has entered all transactions, bills, checks, received payments and whatnot for the month and or year, whichever time period we are talking about. Then as of the end of the month or year, the cutoff date, we did the adjusting process in order to make the financial statements correct so that we could create the financial statements from the adjusted trial balance. Now we've created the financial statements and we are moving to the closing process, meaning that some of the accounts being temporary accounts, the income statement and draws down here, need to go to 0 so that we can start over. So we need to clean those out, make them go to 0, put all that amount into the owner's equity account in order to start the new time period. So similar to running a race, if we were clocking to see how long it took for someone to run a race, after they have finished, we have to start over at 0 again and count up. So all these accounts that are temporary, that deal with time differences, need to go back to 0 so we can start at 0, count back up again. So that's going to be our goal. All these accounts here, we need to make them 0, and we need to make that difference go into the capital account. That's all we have to do. Once we're done with that, all these accounts will be 0 and the capital account will include the balance of them. So it's going to be a longer journal entry, but it's a fairly simple idea, simple process. So what we're going to do first is I'm just going to take a look at the revenue. That's the first thing we're going to close out, and we can see that it says it has a credit balance. So we need to make it go down to 0. So we're going to do the opposite thing to it. So I'm going to take this revenue account, I'm going to right click on it, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to go up to cell C5, right click, paste 1, 2, 3, and in the debit column, I'm just going to type in there whatever's in the revenue account, which in this case happens to be 332,250, and enter. Now I'm gonna post this as we go, which is a little bit unusual to what we've done before, but because this is a long journal entry, I want to post as we go. So obviously we are not in balance. I don't have an equal number of debits and credits here, but I do want to see if this does what I want it to do, which is to make this go to 0. So I'm going to make them all go to 0. Then I'm going to worry about what I need to do to balance the journal entry after that. So I'm going to post this as we go in cell H17. I'm going to say this equals, point to that 332,250. When we hit enter, this should go to 0, put us out of balance here, and of course net income will be affected. So we're going to hit enter, this goes to 0, and now we're out of balance. Then I'm going to do the same for the expense account. We say, well, this has a debit balance, and I want to make it go to 0. Therefore, I'm going to do the opposite thing to it, which would be a credit. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it right underneath in cell C6, right click, paste 1, 2, 3. It's got 195,870 in it. So I'm going to go to the credit side this time. That's what I need to make it go to 0. I'm going to say negative 195,870. Enter. Puts brackets around it for me because that's the format of the cell. Once again, I'm not in balance. I can see that the debits don't equal the credits here, but I'm going to post this anyways as we go. And then at the end of this journal entry, I'm going to go back and see what we need to do to reconcile it. So I'm going to say this equals that credit. I'm going to post it as we go. This should go to 0, and we'll still be out of balance by the difference in the journal entry, which is the debit minus the credit. We're off by, of course, the 136,380. So then the utilities, also an expense, has a debit balance. I need to make it go to 0. I'm going to do the opposite thing to it, which in this case would be a credit. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to put it in cell C7, right click, paste it 1, 2, 3, values only. And what I need to put in there is that 42,375. So I'm just going to type in here 423, or a negative 42375 to represent a credit, and enter. It'll format that for us. Then we're going to go down to cell C19 and then equals. I'm going to post it as we go, that 42,370, and it's going to take this to 0. We're still going to be out of balance. What are we out of balance by? The 94 now. Why? Because the debits minus the credits add up to that 94. So then we're going to keep going. I need to make this go to 0. It's also an expense, has a debit balance. Therefore, I'm going to do the opposite thing to it, which is a credit for whatever is in there. So I'm going to copy that. Going to put my cursor in C8, right click, paste 1, 2, 3. Then that's in the credit column in E8 to negative 1,000. That will format it with brackets. Then we're going to post as we go. Once again, of course, we are out of balance here. We know that if I sum these up, we're out of balance, but we're just going to keep on posting and worry about that at the end. Equals the 1,000, enter. That made this go to 0. We're still out of balance by that 93. Now, if I highlight that, that's the 93,005. Then we're going to post the next expense, which is supplies expense. Has a debit balance represented by the fact that it does not have brackets, like all expense accounts. We need to make it go down. We're going to then do the opposite thing to it, which is credit. So I'm going to copy that, paste it 1, 2, 3 in cell C9, then credit that for a negative 2925 and enter. Formats that for us. We're still not in balance. We have the 90,080 now. I'm going to post as we go, however, to see if we're doing what we need to be done. This equals the 2925, which should bring this down to 0. Then last one, depreciation expense, has a debit of 1,100 in it. So once again, we need to make it go to 0. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste it right underneath in this long journal entry and credit it for what is in there. So we're going to put in a negative 1100. And once again, we're still out of balance here by 88,980. I'm going to post that as we go, making this go to 0. So this equals the 1100. That should go to 0. We should be off by the 88,980. So if I highlight this, we're off by 88,980. Where have we seen that before? We've seen that in net income, 88,980, because we could see that the credits minus the debits are net income of 88,980. If we just closed out all the debits and the credits, then we're off by 88,980, the difference being net income. So if I was to highlight this, you don't need to do this part of it, but I'm going to sum these up and say the debits add up to this, the credits now add up to this. Now I'm just going to figure out what the plug needs to be in order to make this be in balance. What do I need to plug in here to remain in balance? So if the debits add up to 332,250 and the credits minus the credits 243,270, then we need, of course, a plug of 88,980. It needs to be on the credit side. So if I was to put in that plug here, the 88,980, it should be a credit, negative 88,980, that will then put us in balance there. So the only question is, what account do we post that to? Now, if you wanted to know a formula to do that quickly, notice if I just summed this up, it would add up to 88,980. So if I did this equals SUM, notice that I can sum up both sides of this. I can sum up two columns. This column, whatever's in, all that. I don't really care that there's blank cells. That's fine. It'll still sum it up. And there we have it. It adds up the plug. That's the plug. So that would work, except that it's going the wrong way. I need to make it negative. So how could I make that negative and still use the sum function? We could put a negative sign in front of the s. So I could say take that sum and make it negative, or it's the same as multiplying it times -1 and enter. Now that has done what we need it to do. Now it adds up to 0. So once again, if I wanted to do that more quickly, instead of hitting equals, I can just hit negative instead of equals, sum, and then highlight this area and take the negative sum of it, and that will give us the plug. That's kind of like the plug formula. So then the only question is, what does that amount go to? It should go to the capital, the amount represented that is owed to the owner. This is what the company has earned. Therefore, what it has earned should go to the owner. Owner's equity has a credit balance, and if they generated revenue, it should go up by the amount that has been generated with another credit. So we're going to do the same thing to it, increasing the capital account. So I'm going to right click, copy that, paste it 1, 2, 3 here. I'm going to unhighlight, I'm going to delete this area, and then I'm just going to post that last amount. I'm in H15 equals this credit. Once we post it, this will go up, this will go back in balance. So there we have that. And now we're just missing, everything is 0, that's what we wanted. Now we just need to zero out the draws. The draws represent what the owner has taken out of the company in this time period. So this represents what is owed to the owner, because he owns the assets minus the liabilities. And this represents the draws that has been taken out. So we want to make this go to 0, and it's a debit balance, so we're going to credit it. That means that we're going to debit this, which will bring down the capital account. So let's do that. So I got to do whatever I need to do to make draws go to 0. It has a debit, therefore I'm going to do the opposite thing to it, which is a credit. So I'm going to copy this, I'm going to skip a line, skip another line, put it on the bottom, right click, paste it 1, 2, 3. Then I'm going to put it in the credit side, a negative 5,000. And this one only has 2 accounts affected, so I could go and put the debit in there, 5,000, and the debit's going to go to the capital account. And the capital account has a credit balance, and therefore if we debit it, we're doing the opposite thing to it, which will make it go down, which makes sense because the capital account represents in essence what is owed to the owner, and if the owner took out 5,000, then it owes the owner 5,000 less. So I'm going to copy this and paste it 1, 2, 3 there, and then we can post this. I'm going to go to the capital account, double click on it, go to the end of it, say plus, point to that 5,000, and it should bring this amount down by 5,000. Then we'll go to the second half and we'll say equals in cell H16, point to this 5,000 credit. That's a debit, that's a credit, they're the opposite. That'll make this go down, put us back in balance there. So now we have zeros. The post-closing trial balance will have no amounts in draws or the income statement. It basically just has the balance sheet accounts now, the permanent accounts. And now we can see here that the assets minus the liabilities equals the 742.8. That's the book value of the company. It is owned by one owner if it's a sole proprietor. Therefore, that's what is owed to the owner, or is what the owner can walk away with if they sold all the assets, paid off all the creditors, theoretically.